We are live. Hello, Ella.
Hello. I'm so excited to be here. Yay.
Good. I'm excited to have you. You were one of the people when I started this podcast. You know, I wanted it to be a human interest story podcast, and you were one of the first people I was like, I got to get Ella on
Oh,
because you, from the moment you walked into our doors as a law clerk at Dryer Babbage, and I saw your work ethic, and I heard more about your story. I was always impressed with what you did. I remember telling people, I'd be like, I thought I had it hard getting through the stuff that I got through, and you had it so much harder, and you did it with such grace. And so, really excited to have you here so that you can kind of explain how you got as an African American single mother of two kids, uh, all the way through law school while working full time and taking care of these kids. Now
yeah.
I've got kids, it's a beast. That alone is a full time job.
Yeah.
So it's really great that you were able to do that. So why don't we start real quick talking about just your background? Where did you grow up?
Sure. Yeah. I grew up right here in Sacramento, born and raised. Haven't really left. I went to high school, or I lived primarily in like the suburbs, so like Roseville area. Went
Hmm.
to Oakmont High School. After high school, I thought about going to college, but it wasn't really, well, that's a lie, actually. I went to college for like a couple weeks
Hmm.
and I just decided it wasn't for me at that time. I didn't think that college was something that I was going to need. I worked really hard. I was raised also by a single mom, so I kind of had a good example in front of me of just what strong work ethic was like.
Hmm.
So for me, college was never really talked about in my household. Nobody in my family went to college. I'm the first person ever to go to college. So it just, I thought about going to college. I thought that was the way I should have gone, but I was more motivated to make money in the job that I was doing, which was Jamba Juice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was a general manager at like 20 years old. I had my own store, and then I got pregnant with my daughter, and her father did not want to be a part of it, so I had a baby by myself, and I was working 60 hours a week, and I just at one point, I know I've had two major epiphanies in my lifetime, and this was the first one where I had a moment on my lunch break where I was just like, I'm working 60 something hours a week. My mom is pretty much taking care of my baby while I'm out here making, $16 an hour or whatever it was 12 years ago. I don't remember, but
That was a
um,
lot of money back then.
yeah, I mean, I felt like I was doing okay, but I wasn't making the money that I felt justified me being away from my kid. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It wasn't
Sure.
enough. And so I felt like, okay, do you want your daughter to have the same kind of life that you had where, you're always your mom's struggling and we're always trying to, and so I thought if I'm going to be taking time away from my daughter, I want to be at least spending that time investing in myself, which would
Sure.
then trickle back to my daughter. So I decided at that point when I was 20 to enroll in school, community college. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I've always thought I wanted to be a lawyer, but never thought that was really a possibility for me. I don't come from money. I don't come from educated family. So yeah, I just decided to go to community college and just kind of take one class at a time and progressively build from there.
Wow. So let's go back a little bit. Your mom, single mom. When was she? As long as you could remember, single. Did your parents stay together for a time, or how did that work?
No, yeah, actually, my mom was single my entire life. My mom and my dad were never together. They were together, but they never got married. But they were never together when I was around. So my mom got pregnant with me. By that point, they had broken up, and my dad was living in LA as a musician. And my
Mm.
mom was a dancer, so they met on tour. And then when she got pregnant with me, she just decided that it was time to be mom and start taking care of business, and that's what
Are
happened.
you an only child?
No, I have a brother too. Yeah, he's a
Okay.
little bit older. He was around with my mom and dad together, but then, like I said, dad dipped. So
I
yeah,
see. And did he go with dad, or did he stay with you
no,
guys?
he's around. So my mom took care of me and my brother full time, and dad saw us, every couple of years for to take us to Disneyland or whatever, but never really was involved too much.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you how do you think that shaped you? You hear a lot about these studies where they're like, um, what a father doing in the home versus not, and how, there's likely, the statistics, you hear a lot about these statistics, and you've kind of broken all of those. I mean, you've been kind of not you're above the norm, I guess is what you could say. So how do you think that affected you? Did you feel like you were missing something?
Yeah. I think it affected me a lot. I think it affected me a lot more than I realized when I was younger. Now I recognize it as kind of like this need to kind of, I have to feel love in some kind of way, right? Like especially from men or male attention, because I didn't get that from a father figure at home, and I was never really shown how to properly be loved by a man. So I think that kind of affected me later on, especially when you look at like the men that I chose to be fathers of my children, and where I'm at right now, right? Just having to kind of do all of this on my own. I think that says a lot about, the type of men that I've picked for myself, because I didn't have an example growing up.
You feel like that was kind of like an abandonment issue, maybe?
Yeah. And, kind of, and, when we get a little bit to like the mental health stuff that you and I've talked about, I think, a lot of my issues, especially in law school, had a lot to do with like worthiness, feeling like I wasn't worthy. I didn't belong there. I wasn't good enough to be there. And I think that kind of stuff stems back to a lot of things that happened in my childhood, including my dad I'm not worth my dad wanting to be around for me,
So it's interesting you bring that up, because I remember hearing this on a TED Talk, I think it was, or something like that. And I really identified with it. They were talking about highly functional, highly successful people. And the person said, almost every highly functioning, successful people or person has two things. They have a superiority complex where they think that they can do everything better than everybody else. And they also have an inferiority complex where no matter what they do, they never feel like they've done enough.
Amen.
And when I heard that, I go, that is exactly me, because I walk in, sometimes you and I have similar stories, though yours is way more dramatic and way more impressive than mine, in that we were able to do things that a lot of people aren't willing to do.
Right.
They're not willing to sacrifice as much as you have, certainly, and to some extent I have. But it never occurred to me, and maybe you can talk about this to yourself, but at least for me, it never occurred to me that I couldn't do any of this stuff. You know what I mean? Like even when people were like, "Oh, law school, that's crazy."
Yeah,
like, that's not that crazy. I could do it. You know what I mean?
It's weird. I felt the same way. I just felt like I couldn't do it because maybe I didn't have the money. Like I didn't know how to do it, but I never thought that I wasn't smart enough to get through these things. I think because I wasn't raised around a lot of educated people. Like I never met a lawyer before I went to law school. You know what I mean? So it's like, I just didn't really know how to go about doing it. And I remember like talking to my mom and being like, "Mom, I think I want to go to law school." And she laughed at me. And I don't think she laughed at me because she didn't think I could do it, but laughed at me like, "Are you crazy? Like, like that's a ridiculous type of feat to take on." And I don't know. I think I like to challenge myself. I like to prove to myself that I can do it,
That was one of the questions. So every podcast, I put a general synopsis of who's coming on, and I ask people if they have a question they want to ask anonymously to go ahead and ask it. And one of the questions that came through was, did you have people in your life, and it sounds like you did, who didn't believe in you, and how did you overcome that?
Yeah, I did. I had quite a lot of people every step of the way. I feel like I remember the first time I had like said to somebody that I wanted to go to law school, and it was actually on the phone. I was working at Jamba Juice, and I was on the phone with another general manager, and I told him I just stepped down. I want to go to law school. And this was before I'd even started at community college, and it was just dead silence on the other line for like straight up like 15 awkward seconds. And I was like, okay. And then I had gone home and talked to my husband, and I was like, I just keep getting this like reaction from people, like it's like they don't support me or whatever. And he's like, well, maybe we should just not talk about it, kind of thing. So I kind of, and Beyonce says this quote, and I want to say Michelle Obama has said it a couple times too, that, you know, don't talk about what you're going to do, just do it. And then, you know, and then let people kind of ask you how you did it later. And that's kind of what I chose to do. I just chose to move silently. I always had in my mind when I went to community college and then when I went to Sac State and so on and so forth, that, you know, I had this idea, you're going to try to get into law school, you're going to do, but you don't need to tell everybody that that's what you're going to do, because then, you know, what if it doesn't happen that way? But yeah, so that's kind of how I coped with that. And I just, you know, other people's opinions of me are not my business. Like, I don't care what you think about me. You don't know me in the way that I know me. And to some extent, you know, sometimes when people have those doubts or they say those kinds of nasty, negative things, or they're thinking about that, it's almost like it's a reflection of their own insecurities.
Oh, 100%.
Right. So, yeah. So it's like, I don't really take those kinds of things personal anymore.
You know, what's interesting. And I don't know why this is. I often wonder, I'm like, am I just wired differently? Because I hear so many people who, they say they're like, oh, nobody said I could do it. And so it was like the crab in the bucket pulling me back down and all that. And I just go, God, you know, every time someone told me I couldn't do it, I used it as fuel. You know what I mean? I just was like, okay, you watch me do it. You know, exactly. Like I felt like it almost gave me a drive to want to do it that much more. Yeah. I don't know if that's necessarily the most emotionally mature thing to say or do, but I would always use it that way. And it was even funny for me. I noticed that when I remember this one person who good friend of mine from high school, it was after I had won, I don't know, one of the super lawyer awards or whatever. And, you know, I posted it on Facebook because, you know, you gotta brag when you win those things, right? You gotta show everybody you're good, you know? And so she came up to me and she's like, wow, you do this and you're a great dad and you're doing all this stuff. Who would have thought? And I was like, what did you think was going to happen?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
I thought, I knew.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what did you think was going to happen?
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess it sounds like what you did was you just kind of said, okay, well, then I'm not going to tell people what I'm doing. I'm just going to go do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
And, what would you say to somebody, like if somebody's out there, what would you say would be the best approach if there's someone out there right now in that kind of area where, and it's true, I got to say, it's true. I heard someone say one time, you can really tell how successful you're going to be by the people you're hanging around.
Oh yeah.
Right? And like, if you're hanging around a bunch of people who are just telling you, you can't do this and you can't do that, you got to get new friends.
Absolutely.
But what would you say to somebody who maybe was in your spot, 21 years old, thinking about going to school, has these big dreams, but have all these people who don't really believe in them? What would you say to them?
I would say exactly what I just said to you. Other people's opinions of you are none of your business. You have to just shut those people out. You have to stay focused on your goals. Discipline is like a huge word that I like write everywhere. I write it in journals. I'm constantly, you have to stay disciplined. You have to stay focused, and you can't listen to other people because those other people are wanting their own dreams that they're not going after. Do you know how many times people have said things to me that, you know, initially would have hurt my feelings, but then after thinking about it, I'm like, oh, they're just jealous. You know, it's just a jealousy type of feeling, or it's a, you know, because people are scared to dream big, right? They're scared to pursue the things that they feel like they can't achieve themselves. So my suggestion to those that are feeling that way or considering going to school and have these big dreams is you can do anything that you want to do. You know, don't put limitations on your own beliefs and your own goals. You know, people have done far more than I have that had a way worse background or story, you know what I mean? And they've come up, they've risen, and because they believe that they can do it. So it really starts with yourself. Like, you have to believe in yourself. You have to believe that you can do it. And that's it, period.
And I'll tell you that what you said there hit right on the head. The discipline is so key.
Yeah.
I mean, I have people occasionally come to me and they say, man, you know, you were able to do all these things. You're successful at all these things you do. Like, how do you stay motivated? And I go, I don't stay motivated. Are you kidding me? I go, it's like, you know, the thing is it's just automatic pilot for me. Like, it's not, when I wake up, when my alarm goes off at 4:45 in the morning, it doesn't matter if I want to get out of bed or I don't want to get out of bed. How I'm feeling doesn't matter.
Right.
This is what I'm doing. I've made a contract with myself and I don't negotiate.
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
if it's time to hit the gym, it's time to hit the gym. If I say I'm going to be there for an hour, I'm there for an hour. If I know I got a meeting, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if I'm sad. Doesn't matter if I'm happy. It doesn't matter if I'm excited or not. You do what you got to do, and you don't finish until you're done.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that's what I keep telling myself. Everyone says, and we'll get into the bar stuff later, obviously, but there have been people along the way like, oh, well, what are you going to do now? Like, I'm like, I'm going to keep taking it. You know what I mean? I started something 11 years ago and I will be damned if this one test keeps me from completing it. I don't know where I'll be 10 years down the road. Maybe I'll pursue something else if I choose to, but I will complete this because I started it. And it's important to me to show my children that you have to finish what you started.
Yeah. That was something that was important to me when I was going through my law school experience. I walked in with one kid and I walked out with three and a fourth on the way. But I always said to myself, and maybe this was a way to kind of justify not being home much, but I said, you know what, I want my kids to see, because I was just like you, like my parents, they started college, but neither one finished.
Yeah.
And they struggled financially. They're great people. They supported me. My dad had his demons. He was able to overcome them after a long battle. He's just a great guy, but they really struggled financially over those things. And I had to get it within myself. I realized very quickly I was on my own. And so I wanted to show that example to my kids. It sounds like the same thing for you. You wanted to show your kids you can do it no matter what your circumstances are. And so that's really awesome that you were able to do that. Real quick, go back to, you went to community college. Did you transfer to Sac State, UC Davis?
I transferred to Sac State. Yeah. This is so weird. I went to American River College. I slowly just did classes here and there. I wanted to be a lawyer. I remember going and talking to a counselor and being like, if I were to be a lawyer, what should I major in? Criminal justice? And they were like, no. I think she said English or business. Oh, and yeah. And I was like,
was that Lori Kubitschek over there at Sac State? You said that?
No, she was my Sac State advisor, but I'm talking at American River College. But right. Lori Kubitschek's amazing too. But no, she was before. And I was like, okay, so I just decided to go with business because I didn't want to go to school for English, which now in hindsight, I feel like it probably would have benefited me a little bit more with law school. But anyways, I just kind of put one foot in front of the other and just was like, well, I'm going to try to see if I can get to Sac State. Got into Sac State. Then I met Lori, and they had the pre-law for co-ed fraternity there. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, well, let me join this club and see like what it takes to get into law school. And that's kind of where it kind of began for me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's it's very similar for me. I didn't do the pre-law thing. When I talk to kids now who I say kids like I'm some grandfather, but when I talk to young people who are thinking about going to law school and they ask that question, I ask them first, I go, what kind of lawyer do you want to be? Do you want to be a trial lawyer? Do you want to be, what do you want to do? And then when they say they want to be a trial lawyer, I go, then you should take whatever, it doesn't matter what your major is going to be. You could be anything. It doesn't matter. But with the extra classes you have, what I did was I took all the classes I could that could get me up in front of people.
Yeah.
So, communications. I took a ton of acting classes. I took like a children's theater class where I actually had to go in front of preschools and kindergartens and like act like the big bad wolf and do all these things just so I was more comfortable getting up in front of people. And I would highly recommend people do that if they want to. If they want to be trial lawyers. If they just want to, go to the state, then that doesn't matter. They can.
No, I totally agree with you. I feel like once you get to law school and that Socratic method hits, I mean, you better be prepared to speak in front of people and to speak confidently. And
I don't think, and you can comment on this in your perspective, but I don't think people understand the leap between college and law school. I mean, I didn't feel like the leap I did the same thing. I went to American River College and transferred to Sac State. I don't feel the jump from ARC to CSU SAC was that significant.
No.
But boy, the jump from Sac State to McGeorge was huge.
Yeah.
It was a really hard, even just the idea that you could go to Sac State and go to an office hour and learn everything you needed to know in that office hour that you were missing to get an A on your test or your paper. You go to McGeorge and you go to office hour and they're not willing to give you anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I don't feel like I told you a little bit that I was starting a YouTube channel and I filmed my first one. And it's actually kind of about this very topic, is that I feel like there isn't a lot of preparation for preparing you for what law school really entails. I remember like the first couple of days being like, do we get homework in law school? Like I didn't, you know what I mean? Like traditional homework, or what do we do? You know? And so I did not see the movie The Paper Chase prior to law school. So I'd never seen that infamous scene where dude gets, yelled at for not doing the reading or whatever. So, it's weird. I started developing this extreme anxiety and like panic issues throughout law school, because I was like, I just felt like, like you said, if I would have maybe taken more public speaking type of classes, or if I would have been a little bit more prepared for what it all entailed, I think that I wouldn't have been so stressed. I mean, I think I would have, law school stressful in general, but I think I wouldn't have been such a mess all the time.
You felt a mess. Do you think that got better over time or worse over time?
Oh yeah, it definitely got better. I think the first year, and you probably can, agree with this. I don't know. Everyone's got different experiences, but I think the first year for me was just terrifying. I mean, I was just every day like shaking, like I don't want to go to class. I don't know. I think this is for me. I don't think I could do it, or whatever. But by the end, you get a little bit more comfortable with, not everyone here is learning. Like nobody here like knows all the answers. So if you call on me and I don't know, or I don't answer appropriately, or I don't have the right answer or whatever, that doesn't mean I'm an idiot. Half of the class probably is thinking the same exact thing, So yeah, I definitely started feeling more comfortable and more confident, especially as, from the first year, you don't know the difference between an affidavit and a subpoena or a declaration, right? And so you're saying these terms, and then, other people are looking at you like you're dumb or whatever. But then over time you learn, and I definitely feel like I got more comfortable over time, for sure.
Oh yeah. It was, I think also, I don't know where you were. We'll talk about your journey into working for our firm, but yeah, I felt the same way. I think that, man, if I had to do it over again, and I do a lot, the law clerk position that we have at the firm is really a mentoring position for attorneys, if you want it to be that way. Yeah. And I tend to be that way. I like mentoring law clerks, especially people who are going to be going through, or going through law school. But I always, like my last law clerk, she's just now finishing up her last year in law school. She's no longer clerking for me, but she was going through her last year. And
is she finishing her last year?
Yeah, she's finishing now. And and so but I remember her coming in and being so stressed about grades, and I was just like, okay, I've been an attorney now for 10 years. Do you know how many people have asked me what my GPA was in law school? Zero. Yeah. All those certifications you stress about. You know how many people asked me if I was on moot court? Zero. I was on the honors trial team. I won the Whitkin Award, which for those who don't know, it's a big deal. You're number one.
I was going to say, that's pretty amazing, actually.
I got the Whitkin and advanced trial ad, and they were gushing over what I did. And guess how many people gave a crap about that? Zero. Not a single person cares. Right. And while you're in that bubble, you sit there and you're stressed out about grades, where you're ranked. Oh, yeah. Like, are you in the top 10%? Are you in the top 20? Are you in the trainer society? Are you, all these different things. And none of that matters. Once you pass that bar, all that matters is, what are you doing right now? What is your work like now? What is your experience like now? Right. Nobody cares about how you did in law school. Right. Everyone's a lawyer, and you're going through it. And I just wish that more people would realize how, if I had realized what I know now back then, my law school experience would have been much less stressful and a much better experience.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I think my first year for sure for me.
Well, but also, and maybe you can talk about this because we wanted to talk about coping and some of the questions you had here. We've got some people who clearly are going through therapy, asking questions.
That's okay. I love therapy.
um, is how did you cope with the competitive lifestyle that is? I mean, and mind you, also, getting on a bit of a rant here about the McGeorge experience. But in the evening division in McGeorge, you worked full time the whole time you were there, right?
Yeah.
And you had 2 kids at home that you're dealing with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you're up there against some of those people don't have jobs. You know what I mean? They just didn't have the grades to get into the day division, so they end up going to the evening division, and then they don't work, and they just do really well. And that adds to the stress to the business professional who has to work. So how did you cope with that?
Yeah. So the first year, I struggled quite a bit with all of that the first year. They talk about the class rank, and mind you, this is all new and foreign to me. I'm like, I don't understand all of this. So I was like all other law students, really stressed out about it, like, oh, my class rank, whatever. And then I'm just going to be totally honest, because this is the human experience type of, podcast. I ranked second to bottom, right? Wow. So there was one person below me. And I remember
checking. This is your first year? This is your first year?
This is the first year.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I remember being like, I'm just feeling like a total, like you're an idiot, you're stupid, you can't do anything, like you're, towards the bottom. And now added to this, I was a mess. I was crying all the time. I was very, very hard on myself, extremely hard on myself. And so the Dean of Student Services there, I actually made an appointment with her, and I was bawling in front of her, and her and I are actually still good friends. I won't like name her, but we're still good friends. And I'll never forget, we were sitting there talking, and she said exactly what you kind of just said, Ella, like, you stop. Don't compare yourself to any of these people. This class rank doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Other people don't have kids. These other people aren't working full time. These other people are not living paycheck to paycheck, wondering how they're going to take care of their kids and how they're going to feed their kids. And all you need to do is pass and get through, period. Mm-hmm. And so I stopped putting that pressure on myself so much. From that moment forward, I stopped caring about, awards and moot court and, all of that stuff. My goal was just to pass. I just want to get out of here. I just want to, be a lawyer, and that's it. Congratulations to those that have the ability to, do these, amazing things with their academic careers. But I wasn't somebody that was in a situation that made sense for me, and I wasn't going to burn myself out or kill myself over that.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting about that? I remember the first day, and I'll never forget this because I actually applied this to. Now I apply this very much, and I tell everybody this story. He was the what do you call him? The vice. He'd be like a vice principal. I don't remember what you call him at McGeorge, but he got up there, and he, it was during one of those days that the week that before law school started,
orientation days or whatever.
Orientation. I wish I would have never gone to any of those. This one thing was the best thing that came out of that was he said, how many of you people think you're going to be in the top 10%? And like half the class. And he goes, how many of you guys think you're going to be in the top 25%? And the rest of them raise their hand. He goes, here's the deal. He goes, A students become, A students become professors, B students become judges, C students become millionaires.
Yeah, Roger Dreyer told me that same thing, actually. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm a C student all the way.
No, that's it. It's true though, like, I think of all those people who were at the top of the class, and they were super smart in class and all about the theory and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But you know what? I look at where I am, and it's not like supposed to be a brag about me necessarily. I have a lot of people who came out in my class that are in a very similar circumstance. I look at where I'm at versus where they're at. And I got to tell you, I'm in a better spot. I mean, big time as far as like success, if you're talking about the financial part of it, the success of, the accomplishments, it's that's what I try to tell people, my lowest grade, I'm a personal injury lawyer, which is all tort law.
Right.
My worst grade in law school was torts.
Right.
I mean, and here I am, and I'm a very successful personal injury attorney. So all that stuff, it's funny. I even tell my son, he's in high school, and he's 16, he's a junior, and all this stuff is super important to him, and I remember being in that spot, and I don't know how many times I tell him, I'm like, dude, I'm telling you, 10 years from now, none of this stuff is going to matter.
Yeah.
And I was in a very similar situation as you. My first year of law school, super stressed out, because you're sitting there and you're like, how am I going to make this work? All these people they got 40 extra hours a week to study.
Yeah.
They're making it. I'm barely making it. I wasn't the number 2 bottom, but I wasn't in the top, anywhere near where I thought I should be. And I just look back and I go, man, like all that stuff I stressed about, it worked out.
Yeah, right. I know. It's like, wow, all that unnecessary stress and waste of energy with tears and all that stuff. I just am like, whatever happens, happens. As long as I know that I've put the most effort that I can into it, and I'm doing the best that I can, that's really all that you can do. So
putting that much stress on yourself, do you think that kind of drives you to be a little bit better too?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that I'm always pushing myself to do more. So it's funny. Sometimes I kind of joke around with friends and family. I'm just like, why do I do this to myself? Like, who told me to become a lawyer? I picked like the most difficult profession to like prove to myself that I could get a college degree or whatever. But yeah, I'm always kind of striving to do the most. That's why it's like, I know once I get past this hump, I don't know where I'll be next, because I know I can't ever like sit still with where I'm at. I'm never really content. I'm always kind of pushing myself further. And I like to use this quote where it's like, what is it? It's, what is it? You grow. Well, essentially this is not the quote, but you grow in places where you're uncomfortable, right? Yeah. Like you have to put yourself in uncomfortable positions in order to learn and to grow from them. So yeah, I'm constantly stressing myself out or whatever, but I'm learning and I'm growing, and I'm learning how to manage a lot of that stress too, because I haven't always been good with that.
Yeah. It's a work in progress, and the beauty of people like you, and I'm very similar. This is very therapeutic. Is that you're always learning, because you're always putting yourself in these really uncomfortable positions. I go to the gym quite a bit, and I tell people when they first start coming to the gym, I'm a regular and I'm gigantic, so everybody sees me, and so they come up to me and they talk to me about this stuff, and I always tell them, I go, listen, your workouts have to hurt. If they don't, your muscles aren't going to grow. And the other thing I always tell them is, I go, listen, when I first started coming to the gym, it took me almost a year before I saw a muscle in the mirror. So you know what I mean? You gotta trust that these little things, no one workout is going to change your life. Right. Just like no one day of doing all the right things is going to change your life. It's got to be consistency over time. That's why law school is such an attrition. It's almost more of a mind game than it is anything else. It's just seeing who's going to break. Oh, absolutely. And you didn't break. I mean, and that's so impressive. Did you have a specific area of law you wanted to get into?
So when I decided to go to law school, I actually wanted to do juvenile defense. Wow. It's so random, right? I wanted to help children, either delinquents or children that were put in the foster care system. I wanted to kind of give back to the youth in some way, because I had kind of an interesting childhood, because my mom had to work so much. I had people watching me, and things happen, and so I kind of wanted to give back to those kind of environments. But as I got onto working at your firm, I really started loving personal injury. I really did like my job, but it was extremely stressful, added on top of what I was doing with law school. So now I'm kind of like, I don't know. Like I'm doing business litigation, so I do like business litigation, but I'm not really sure like what area. I'm kind of just what I want to do.
How did you come to get the job at our firm at Dreyer Babbage?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. So this may be kind of a motivational story too for other people that watch this. So I got my first law office job at this, I won't name the office, but it's not too far from yours. And I started out as a receptionist. So I never had any legal experience at all. I just got into law school. So I got this job as a receptionist because I wanted to learn about the actual practical day-to-day things of lawyering, right? I was, again, full-time single mom. Dad wasn't around for the kids. And I was making $15 an hour.
Mm.
I was struggling. Like my rent was $1,500 a month. You know, I don't know how I was doing it, but I was doing it. But it got to a point where my mom was like, you need to ask your boss for a raise, because I was more than just the receptionist. I think they recognized really early on that I was a hard worker and I wanted to learn more. So they were like, okay, like let's have you start putting together the shelves for discovery. Let's have you do all of the record ordering and the summary. And I'm like, $15 an hour. And I'm pretty much doing like all of these things.
You're running the office. Yeah.
Yeah. So right. So I asked the HR manager for a raise. I said, I would like to make $20 an hour. And she said, well, put together a PowerPoint as to why you think that you're worth $20 an hour, and you can present it to me and the managing partners and blah, 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 blah. And I remember walking away from that and just being like, no, I'm going to go find another job, because I know that I'm worth $20 an hour. And if you can't recognize that just from my work product, and I have to do more work that I'm not going to be on the clock getting paid for, putting together a PowerPoint while I'm in law school, you know, I don't have time for that. So right. I literally went online like that night and saw that Dryer Babbage was hiring. I didn't know anything about them. I didn't know their reputation at all. I just saw that they were looking for law clerks, and I applied. I got a call like 2 days later, came in for the interview, got the job a couple days later. And I remember talking to the HR manager at Dryer Babbage, and she was like, we forgot to talk about how much money you want. And I was like, is $21 too much? And she's like, oh, that's totally fine. So, and I think because that was actually kind of cheap.
I might have cut yourself short.
I know, right? So I was really proud of myself, because I was like, this lady made me feel like I wasn't even worth $20 an hour. And I just walked in and gave my resume to these people, and they immediately recognized that I was worth at least that. So yeah. And then it was funny. I went back and I told them I was giving my notice, and she actually had not told the partners that I had asked for a raise. And when they found out I was leaving, they were like, how much? Like, what do you need to stay? And at that point, I had kind of just made up my mind, because I was told by Bob Bale all the things that I would be learning. I'd get to sit in depots and all that stuff. And so it was enticing to me.
It really was. You know, it's interesting. Mine's a little bit different than yours, but talking about them seeing your value, I remember I was looking for a legal job, and this is back in 2008, 2009. There were no jobs, you know, I mean, anywhere, because it was right in the middle of the financial crisis.
Oh yeah.
Nobody had there were no jobs anywhere, and everybody went to law school or to business school at that time. So, so there was just a flood of people looking for work. And I was applying for volunteer jobs just to get some legal, and I couldn't even get an interview.
Wow.
I couldn't get a call anywhere. And I knew somebody at church who knew Roger, and Roger had come and spoken our torts class. And I said, you know what, that guy really knows what he's talking about. And so I was just talking about it to a friend. He goes, oh, I know Roger. Why don't you hand me your resume? And so I handed him my resume. He emailed Roger, and I came in there, and they hired me on the spot, like just like that. And I was so grateful, because man, like that changed my life.
Same.
Yeah. And being there, and you know, Roger, you worked with him. I mean, he is the toughest man on the face of the planet to work for, but he's also the most encouraging and he is such a mentor. Bob Bale's the same way.
Yeah.
They really take an interest in you. And I've told him this since, especially when I became a partner. I said, man, you know, like, I don't always agree with everything you do all the time. I know that, you know, sometimes we butt heads a little bit. I go, but man, like, no matter where I go in the law, I'm never going to forget that I am where I am because you gave me a shot. You know what I
Absolutely.
mean? And that's what they do there. That's the thing about, and I can, you know, yeah, I'm a partner at the firm, so I have a vested interest in this, but like, but you know, we really do care about the next generation of lawyers that
Yeah.
come out of there. And when you look at the names of the people out there who are practicing personal injury, whether they're good or not, or whether you like them or not, they all came from there.
Yeah.
They
Oh
all
yeah.
came as a law clerk or worked as an associate for a little while, and they learned the right way.
Yeah.
And it's the legacy that the Dreyer Babbage firm has in Sacramento in personal injury. It's deep, and you're
Yeah.
part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, since leaving, people have called me for job interviews simply because of the name on my resume. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And
Yeah.
looking at how long I was there,
Mhm.
I was there for almost 4 years, working for Bob and Roger. And so I do know what I'm doing in some avenues, and they know that I will give good work product, and now that I've worked at a couple firms, actually, I've worked at a couple different firms in the time that I've been around Dreyer Babbage, and it's like night and day. It really is in some areas. It's just like, ooh,
Yeah.
it's prepared me for quite a bit. My mom even will say sometimes, she's like, wow, Bob Bale really got you ready, huh?
Yeah.
you know, I
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah, they do. It's funny when people leave our firm, like some people leave our firm on bad terms. You certainly didn't. And
yeah,
but some leave on on bad terms, and then they go elsewhere and become rock stars.
yeah,
It just is interesting.
it is.
A question that came through that I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
Who were some of the most supportive people in your life as you went through your journey as a single mom?
Ooh, okay. That is a good question. And there's so many. There's so many because I literally have like so many thoughts and ideas about like I want to write a book after I'm done with all of this. And and there's so many women. I mean, there's men too. I'm not trying to shade on the men, Bob Bale, you've been great to me as well. So is Roger Dreyer. But there have been some women that I feel like in some way were just like guardian angels along the way. You know what I mean? Like women that were just dropped in my life along my path to just be there at the right moment for me when I needed them. The dean of student services was one, who's someone that I could always kind of like knock on her door and cry in her office when I felt like truly giving up. There also, and this kind of goes back to the question where you were asking about coping. So at McGeorge, I don't know about all law schools, but definitely at McGeorge, they have like a mental health services. And Dr. Dale Brody, she was the therapist that I saw the entire time I was in law school, right on campus. I would just, go there around noontime or whatever on my lunch breaks. And I would just sit with her and I would just, cry or laugh or whatever I needed to get out at that time. And it's like, I haven't talked to her since I've graduated, but I almost emailed her today for something else. And it's just like, I just feel like at some point our paths will cross again and it'll just be like no time has left at all. She made me feel like, I don't know, she instilled a lot of confidence in me that I didn't have at the time that I started law school, which was also the time that I was filing for divorce. And, I hadn't, my life was changing completely. And so, yeah, her. And then there has been a few other women, in the legal field that have been, instrumental in, helping me and giving me, guidance. Some that I don't necessarily, wouldn't call my best friends or my mentors or whatever, but have given me great words of advice. Noemi Esparza is one, she is also a single mother. And, she, I think, is a first generation. I think she came from Mexico, right? She, had to get all of that going. So she's been through a lot of stuff too. And there's been a lot of
For people who don't know her, she's about 5 foot tall.
Yeah, she looks like Selma Hayek. She's a little firecracker. And, it's funny because when I started at Dreyer Babbage, I used to be so scared of her. I remember like the first week, I was like, she's terrifying. And I was singing at one of the events and I wasn't singing to everybody. I was just kind of practicing. And she was standing there. I didn't realize she was standing there. And she was like, you have a beautiful voice. You have to sing for us. And I was like, Noemi Esparza talked to me. And she was nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. So she, but she told me in the break room one time because she's super tiny and I'm super tall, and she used to always say all the time, "Don't slouch, stand up straight." Like, do you know how bad I wish that I was a foot taller? Men would be just, crying when I walk into a depot, just scared and terrified. I'm like, that's right. So I try to embody a little bit more of that. I'm not as terrifying as her, but but
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah.
She is fought. I'll tell you, as much as I know Emmy as somebody, I'm afraid of her too.
Yeah.
She she's actually very impressive what she's had to go through and what she's gotten through. And you hear her story about the things that some men will say to her in a deposition or something like that. Man, I couldn't imagine. Now, you said something earlier real quick that I thought was interesting. You said you filed for divorce around the same time you were starting law school.
Yeah.
So real quick, let's go back. When did you get married? How old were you?
Yeah, I got married to my ex-husband when I was, we got married when I was 22. Yeah. And then I had my second child when I was 23. Yeah. Okay. And we got a divorce in 2017, a couple weeks, I want to say 3 weeks maybe after law school started.
That's when you filed or when the divorce was final?
That is actually when I kicked him out. And then I filed, within a week or two after that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right when you're starting your first year.
It was rough. Yeah. It was not a good time. It was not fun, but it needed to happen. Like I said, everything happens for a reason.
There's never a good time for a divorce, but I got to tell you, I couldn't think of a worse time.
Right. Right.
That's a rough deal. So
yeah.
Was that something, every divorce is different. Was that a long time coming, or was it some event that was a surprise to you?
Yeah. So, like I said earlier, like not having a male figure in my life, I didn't know how to pick men appropriately for myself. And especially when I was a young woman, right? So I had my daughter with my high school sweetheart. So they have two different dads. And then when I had her, I met my ex-husband, and she was still really little, and he wanted to be, step in and be dad and all this stuff. So I thought I found a good one. I really thought that this is going to be a good fit, but I ignored a lot of the other major issues or red flags because I was young and I just didn't, think about it. When I met him, he was sober. And then, slowly that changed. And I didn't know because when we started dating, I wasn't even of drinking age. And so when I became of drinking age and we were able to go out to places and order drinks and things like that, then I started noticing that the alcohol was a problem for him. And so over time, things got worse and then better and then worse again. I think a lot of the issue for him, and I won't necessarily speak for my ex-husband, he's come a long way too. He's not exactly where he needs to be, but he is sober, and he's been sober for a couple of years. So I'm proud of him for that. But, he had his own demons and he was struggling with quite a bit. And I think keeping me kind of under his thumb, like he was working full time. He was the breadwinner, while I was in like community college. I had like a part-time job while I was taking care of the kids when they were little and whatnot. But as I started to progress, I started to realize that I didn't really like this role of being just this housewife. Like I wanted to have my own career. I wanted to have my own, achievements and things like that. So I think that started to become an issue for him, which kind of, I feel like drove him a little bit more to substance abuse. Because especially when I got into law school, it was like, I started noticing, him kind of pulling away, like, oh, my wife is becoming, something great and I'm not doing anything. And
had he gone to school at all, or was he just working like a standard?
No, he was a contractor, just a basic, I shouldn't say basic, it's a hard job, but he was a laborer and, and he made decent money and he was taking care of our family. But I think it was just a lot of pressure for him too. He worked 6 days a week. And then, I needed some support while I was trying to get through or trying to get into law school and all of that. And I don't know, it just started getting really bad. But it turned from alcohol being the issue to a much stronger, substance, which was cocaine. And I didn't realize it until like the week that law school started. Really, he had confided in me and told me that he was struggling with that. And as a good wife, I, was like, well, let's get you some help. Let's figure this out. And he refused. He didn't want to get any help. He said he could do it on his own. And then like 2 weeks or so later, I went to class, came home from class, and I could tell that he was just jittery and acting weird. And I was like, wow, and I at that point I just told him I was done. I was like, I don't want to deal with this anymore. It's just been 7 years of you going back and forth with substance, and I have to focus on school, and I can't have that around my kids anymore. And so when I kicked him out, it got way worse for me and for him. So
yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So okay. So to recap, you
Yeah.
start law school.
Mm-hmm.
You kick your drug addict, for lack of a better term, drug addict husband out.
Mm-hmm.
Now you got 2 kids.
Mm-hmm.
This had to have been a rough time.
Yes.
Right. So one of the questions that came through was, and I think this is a good time to ask this question, how did you push yourself forward when things seemed rather bleak?
Well, one of the main driving forces is when you have been going to law school for a minute and you have debt and you have that debt. When you have that law school debt and you don't have a degree to show for it, that's a big motivating factor. So for me,
Sure.
I was like, there's no way that I'm going to not graduate and have to pay all of this money back with nothing to show for it. So, again, it's just like, I don't know, like I refuse to give up on myself. I think that if I would have like stopped going, I would have been very resentful of myself. I think it would have been much worse for me. I would have, for the next couple years or however long, but it would have been like, what if I did? Or how, I didn't want to do that to myself. I wanted to be able to do it by any means necessary. And, and just kind of continuing off of what I was just telling you, like when I said it got worse, I had inherited my house that I was living in, but I had like an assumable loan. So I still had to pay a mortgage on it. But I couldn't afford the mortgage anymore. And my ex-husband was gone. He was the breadwinner. And I was making $15 an hour at the law firm. So I lost my house. I had to sell it. But the silver lining of that was there was some equity in the house. So that it wasn't a lot. It was like 10 grand or whatever. So we sold the house before it went completely under, me and my mom, and I kept some of that money, and I was able to pay off some of the debt from the divorce, like some of the credit cards and all of those things. Yeah. And I just, Dr. Brody too, she kept telling me, that was one of the things that she used to tell me in all of our sessions is I used to cry about just various things like, I don't have a boyfriend. I don't have, my own place. Because I had to move in with my mom, which was not fun. All these things I would tell her, and she's like, this is temporary. This is all temporary. You will get through it. Just, stay focused on the task at hand. And that's really what I did. I mean, I don't know. I look back, like you and I said, I don't know how I did it really, but I just kept doing it. I just kept pushing forward.
Yeah. And that's the end. I mean, the time is going to pass no matter what you do. And you're right. Like I think about those times that I had, I obviously didn't have, as much as you that was going on at that time, but I had some stuff too. You heard my story when I shared my story a little bit when I became a partner, about losing my own home, right at the same time. I mean, losing a home, having to move my family, having to get through all that stuff. But, it's those moments that when you don't have a choice.
Right.
I told my son recently, I worry about him because he doesn't have, like, I reached an extra gear because I had to.
Right.
There was no other way to get there. I would never have done it unless I had to. And he is in a position where he's not going to have that.
Yeah.
And so, there's something about when the things are the darkest, I feel like those are the moments when you really figure out what you're really made of.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I
Now
mean,
I don't feel like I can't. I feel like there's very little that I can't do, of course, within reason, right? But,
yeah.
the fact that I can graduate from law school with two children, and going through all the things that I was going through, what's your excuse? What is your excuse that's holding you back from achieving whatever dream it is that you have? People have done it with more or less, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and if you quit in that moment, it's a
yeah.
guaranteed loss,
Oh, 100%.
and
100%.
I really do believe that success is just all about who can hang on the longest.
I agree. I totally agree. Yeah, because
um,
you only fail when you give up.
right,
you
right,
know?
right. Well, that's a good way to segue into the bar. So you
Yeah. Oh,
graduated
my
law
favorite
school.
word, fail.
Well, the bar. So I can tell you, I actually, this may sound a little counterintuitive to some people. I am blessed to have passed the bar the first time. And I have to tell you, I have so much respect for people who didn't pass, because I legitimately believe it's a crapshoot. There's so
I,
much that goes into it, right? I mean, it depends on the questions you're asked, what you studied, what you spent the most time on, how many practice tests you took, there's how you're feeling those days.
mhm,
You know what I mean? Who you're sitting next to can have an effect. I
mhm.
mean, there's so many things that go into it. And I have a number of friends who didn't pass the first time. And man, studying for the bar was probably, and this is going to be hard. There's a lot of strong, like a lot of mental breaks I almost had, but like that was one of the biggest.
Yeah.
Going through the bar was one of the biggest. And I'll just to paint a picture for people who don't know, McGeorge School of Law, that's where my bar prep was. And there's a little quad in between where the library is and some of the classrooms and this little area. And it's a 10-week course. And by about week 8, if you stood in that quad, there were about 30 recently graduated law students losing their mind at any moment during the
Good
day
Lord.
from 8 to 5 when they were studying for the bar. I mean, like pacing, smoking, whatever they could do to not
Yeah.
just lose it in the middle of the day. And you've taken the bar a few times now, right? You just
Yeah.
took it and
Yes.
it didn't work out.
This is
So
the fourth time I'll be taking it. Yep.
yeah. So talk about that a little bit. I mean, so this is one of those times where a lot of people don't take it that many times. Uh,
Yeah. No,
what
absolutely.
what is it that's driving you?
Well, what's driving me is that I know I can pass it, right? I think going back to what you were saying about, it's a crapshoot, right? Like there's this that goes into it, there's that goes into it. But one thing that you didn't mention is that, there are outside extenuating circumstances that can affect your performance too. And it goes kind of back to, what the dean was saying to me during that one session. You can't compare yourself to other people. You're in a completely different set of circumstances, right? The first time I took and here, before I keep going, I feel like with bar prep, with law schools, there's this like one size fits all thing that they pitch to students, and it's not. I wish I would have been a little bit like I wish I would have had more knowledge about a lot of what goes into the bar prior to just jumping it to the first time, because it's like they tell you, oh, most students graduate and then they take it in July. But okay, but you don't have to do that. Yeah, it would probably be better for some people, but it's not better for everybody, right? Like I took it that time, July, right after I graduated, because I thought that's what we're supposed to do. But realistically, I think that I probably shouldn't have, because I didn't have the money. And I was extremely stressed out the whole time I was studying. I ended up, I want to say the second month in, getting a part-time job because I couldn't feed my kids. You know what I mean? Like, because you can't work for like 2 months. So
Yeah.
I had like the money for the exam. I had a little bit of money set up, but it's completely different subject. I don't want to get off topic, but I had to move at this particular point in time that was totally unexpected. So I had to put a deposit down. I had to pay first month's rent. So that cut into a lot of the money that I had set aside. So I just wasn't focused on that the way that I needed to be because I had all these other things that I had to worry about.
Sure.
So that I think the panic and the stress and all of those things is what failed me ultimately with the bar.
Mhm.
It's more than just like your ability to study and prepare or whatever. You have to be mentally prepared for this whole, whatever you want to marathon, however you want to label it. Cause it is like a mental game with yourself, cause you're constantly like, oh, I got this. And then you do a practice essay and get a 55 after you self-grade and you're like, oh my God, I'm so stupid. I'm going to fail. And then it just ruins your whole rest of your study day or whatever.
Sure.
So yeah. So failing the bar the first time, it was, I will say in that moment, and I have not shared this really with anybody other than like my very close friends, it was the darkest day I think like of my adult life. And I mean I literally, and I hate saying this, but I genuinely wanted to die. Like it was an out of body experience. When I saw the word fail, I didn't even understand what that word meant. I was like, what did I fail? What part? Like click. Like I was so confused. I was like, there's no way. Like I studied my soul away. Like how could I have failed? And I remember just sobbing so much that I passed out from just exhaustion in my closet, which is weird because I was weird. Like subconsciously, I wanted to be hidden away from like everybody. I didn't want anybody to see me or know where I was at. I was embarrassed. I was very ashamed. I felt like overall just I had failed at life, forever. I will have to say I didn't pass on the first try. Right. And it took a while to kind of pull myself back out of that. But I did. And I was blessed to have been given an opportunity from the firm, from Dryer Babbage. And that helped me kind of, feel a little bit more confident. The second time when I didn't pass, I was extremely pissed off. I wasn't hurt. I was pissed. I wasn't sad. I was angry because this time around, I felt like I had recognized some of the areas where I went wrong. And I was extremely disciplined. I got up every single day at 6 a.m. I went to the gym. I came home. I did 200 or 100 multiple choice a day or whatever. I did 4 essays every single day. And I barely missed it I don't remember how many points, but it was a few points, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was angry with myself over that one. And then I had to go back and explain to, my boss that I didn't pass. And that's not a good feeling. It sucks. It's horrible. But, and then the third time, you and I kind of talked about that before we started this chat or this conversation. But the third time around was kind of just a one-off. I just had a really weird day. I had a bit of a panic attack. I have extreme anxiety and I have a panic disorder. And so I just panicked in the middle of the exam and I kind of knew in the middle that I didn't pass. So I just kind of had already accepted that like after I walked out and knew I was going to have to take it again. So I wasn't really worried about it. But, I've learned a lot from the experiences of failing. And it's interesting. I still have a lot of friends from my cohort that are still taking it. Like some of them still haven't passed. And I was talking to one of them recently about how, of course it feels awesome to pass on the first try, right? Or I'm sure, it's great. But I think that there's something invaluable with failing and finding the lessons in the failure and picking yourself back up and pushing yourself forward. Because it's like for those who didn't fail, they don't know what it's like, to feel like you've failed something that's so big to you and to have to get on it like a platform almost and tell people. Like I had to tell so many people, like the day that I failed the first time, so many people were texting me, so many people were calling me, and it was very, very hard to say over and over and over again I failed. But I'm okay with that because it's made me who I am. It's made me very, very strong, very strong.
Let me ask you a question about that. You failed the bar, and I know you were sad.
Yeah.
What was the worst thing that happened though?
From the bar failure, you mean? Like after?
Yeah, like kids still love you, right?
Yeah.
Like you still got a job, right?
Yeah.
Still making things work. I think about this a lot because I know a lot of people who are afraid to fail.
Yeah.
And I think about this and I just go, the fear of failure is stopping people from having success.
Absolutely.
Because you don't take risks, you just stay in the same spot.
Absolutely.
But I think about the biggest failures I've had in my life, which, I mean, are they? I mean, I can think of a few. I don't share
Yeah.
all of them because they're still, but like those failures, I've learned so much.
Yeah.
And they've shaped who I am. And every one of those failures that I've had, I've come out so much better in the long run.
Absolutely.
And, you've taken the bar 3 times now, right?
Yeah.
But it's so impressive to me that you have taken it 3 times and you're still willing to go forward. I have a good friend of mine, very intelligent, took the bar 14 times.
Wow.
14 times and passed on the 14th try.
Good. Yeah.
And now is a very successful attorney.
Right.
I mean, and I'll also say to all those people, if people are here, someone from your cohort is listening, and it's, of course, it's very easy for me to say because I didn't have the same experience, but I can tell you from working as an attorney for 10 years now and having very intelligent, very strong partners at my law firm who took it more than once.
Mm-hmm.
It has no bearing on what kind of attorney you're going to be.
Right.
No bearing at all.
Right.
There are people who've taken it more than once and become excellent attorneys, partners at law firms, millionaires.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter. This goes into another question that someone asked. Are the things that you would recommend that people do to keep a good emotional baseline?
Are there things that I would recommend to people to keep a good emotional baseline?
Yeah, things that help keep you kind of.
Yeah. I don't want to necessarily. Yeah. So I would say, so for me personally, I can't tell everybody what works for them and what, but I do a lot of meditation. I do a lot of breath work. I do a lot of things to kind of keep myself centered and calm. If I'm feeling like a panic attack coming on, or if I'm feeling like, oh my God, I'm going to start crying or something, I will step out and I will literally just do breath work. And that's what Dr. Brody taught me through law school, is doing a lot of breathing exercises, because I get very, it's that flight or fight response. I get very, I don't know how to react to this or whatever. And so, so there's that. As far as other, coping mechanisms for keeping mentally balanced and stuff, positive affirmations is another one. I like to journal sometimes, either in the morning or before I go to bed, about, the good things that happen to me in my day, or the things that I'm grateful for. That helps me kind of stay mentally in balance, because it's easy to kind of get lost in this, oh, I'm a failure. I've failed the bar. 4 times or whatever. Yeah. But, I've passed 10 or however many law school classes, right? It's easy to get caught up on the failures and not celebrate the wins or the successes. So I try to remind myself of the good things as opposed to the bad things. And I also try to look at the good things in all situations, right? Okay, yeah, I failed the bar, but maybe it's because it wasn't the right time for me. Maybe I wasn't supposed to be where I was at, so it's changing that philosophy of why is this happening to me, to this is happening for me because, right?
Yeah.
So I try to do a lot of those things. I try to make a lot of time for self-care. I think that's also really, really important, especially if you're in law school or you're considering going to law school or whatever. Having time for yourself to stay mentally balanced is so important. And I didn't do that in the beginning because I didn't have the money or the time. I didn't have money to go get my nails done or whatever when I was first, trying to get on my feet. But taking time to do those things for you to remind yourself of, oh, I love the way I look today, or it makes me feel better or whatever. That helps me stay mentally stable and balanced, I think.
It's actually really interesting. I learned a little bit about this when I first started going through some of the struggles I've gone through in my life, where how really easy it is to take a little bit of self-care. It doesn't take a lot of money. I remember at one point I was really struggling with some confidence issues just due to life circumstances.
Yeah.
And I remember just going, man, I've kind of lost my confidence.
Yeah.
So I just Googled how to be confident. And the thing that was so funny is that these articles I'd read, I'd be like, this stuff is easy. You know what I mean? It was stand up straight, look people in the eye, smile, dress nice, go
Yeah.
to the gym, drink water, get enough sleep,
Hmm.
and smile every now and again at people
Yeah.
and keep a positive outlook. So I was like, well, this is all stuff, my life at that moment had felt so out of control. And I remember thinking, well, these are all things that would be easy to control.
Right.
And the interesting thing about that was as I started doing those things, it was almost instantaneously people started responding differently to me.
Yeah.
And what I found really interesting was the negative people in my life really had a problem with it.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
And it was interesting the comments I would get, like, "Oh, look at you trying to dress better now, and you're trying to smell good, and you're doing these things. Oh, look at you! You must think you're so great now." And I'd be like, yeah,
I am.
yeah.
Actually,
Don't hate me because I'm attractive. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my ex-husband had a really hard time after I kicked him out. It was always just nasty, like, comments, just, oh, you think you're better than everybody else because you're going to be a lawyer or whatever. And I'm just like, I don't know if that's how you feel or, that's your insecurities talking or whatever, but I'm just trying to exude the confidence that I know that I have, right? I'm confident it doesn't mean I don't become insecure on some things or about some things, but yeah, I do try to walk into a room confidently. I am smart, I am XYZ, and, I should own that.
Well, and that's also a good way to really see if the people around you really do. It's interesting, the people who you find out who your real friends are when they're supportive of you bettering yourself.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean?
Definitely.
You really learn a lot about people. There are a couple places that you really learn about people. It's when you're in your darkest moments, who's around to pick you up. Yeah. And then also who are the ones that are cheering you on when things are going better, when you're doing things that are better. Yeah. Everyone's around when you hit the success.
Oh, yeah, they come out of the woodworks from high school.
I remember the first time I got Top Lawyer Sacramento or something like that, one of those awards, and I got calls from people I hadn't heard from high school, wanting to go to lunch.
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, like I got a 7-figure verdict, and I had these old females who wouldn't give me the time of day in my my 20s shooting into the DMs. No, thank you. You know what I mean? I'm not in that spot. And it just was a very interesting time. When that stuff happens, but it's the people who are there when you really need to lean on somebody, and the people who are cheering you on the come up. Those are the ones that you can keep around.
Absolutely.
A couple of questions I wanted to ask. I ask everybody. I think we already know the answer to a couple of these, but I'm gonna ask you, what would you say would be your biggest success in life?
In life, well, I mean, obviously graduating from law school has been a big success for me. Once I pass the bar, it'll mean even more to me, because my goal was, 11 years ago, I'm going to be a lawyer, not just graduate from law school. But thus far, I would say it's a huge success. An even bigger success, though, I think, is just my ability to be a great mom. Like my kids are great kids, and I'm proud of them, and I'm proud of myself for that, because there were times when it was dark for me a lot. And I thought, the way for me to pull myself out of that is like, I don't want my kids to see me like this. I don't, it's hard to be strong, all the time, but I would try my best. And so the fact that my kids are as smart as they are, they're doing as good as they are in school, they're clothed, they're fed, that makes me really proud. And I feel like that's a huge accomplishment for myself, because there was days where I didn't think that I would be able to do it.
Yeah, it's funny. I've told people when they said, how did you get through law school with kids? And I was like, I don't think I could have done it without my kids.
Yeah, right. I don't think I would have even tried. I don't think that I would have gone. I don't think I would have left Jamba Juice. You know what I mean? If it wasn't for my daughter and me feeling like I had to do more for her when she was a baby. Now she's 12. So it's crazy. Yeah. But that's probably my biggest.
It's really, I can't think of anything that I have learned, especially over the last few years when things have been kind of topsy-turvy at times. I can't even emphasize how grateful I am for the time I get to spend with my kids.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's just
absolutely.
I think that's been over the last few years has been something that I've been so grateful for through everything that's gone on in my life is the relationship I have budded with my kids,
Right.
and it's the greatest thing in the world, so biggest failure, is it the bar or is there something else?
Let's see. Let me think hard about that, because it would be easy to say the bar.
Sure.
Trying to think if there's, um, yeah. I mean, I guess we could say, yeah, that some of my biggest failures have been the bar, for sure. I mean, that was definitely the first fail was the hardest one, for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
that was the hardest failure I think that I've had to take.
Yeah.
I never expected myself to be somebody that would fail at the bar, and now I've done it repetitively. But again, it's set me up. I hate to go back to Beyonce, but I'll hail Queen Bee. She said in that same speech that I was quoting earlier that, I forget what the number is, but she's like, I've won 24 Grammys, but I've been nominated 88 times, so it's like she's lost many times. She's lost more times than she's won. So, I try to, remind myself of that. Like,
Yeah.
you may fail a couple times, but it just takes that one pass and you're good,
Yeah.
so just keep pushing.
So that's something that I think is really important. I'm a big sports guy, and you think about that. Babe Ruth hit 750, I don't know, 52 home runs or something like that. Considered the greatest hitter other than Barry Bonds, but he did it without the juice.
Yeah.
And he hit all those home runs, but he struck out over 1,000 times.
Right.
But you know what? He always swung for the fences.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And
yeah.
So that's great. I like I said, I have so much respect for you because it would have been very easy. I remember thinking as I was opening up, waiting for the bar to come through for me, I remember thinking, I'm like, there's no way I can do that again.
I thought the same thing the first time I did.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not taking this ever again, and then I told myself too, and my family, I was like, I'm not taking this again. And then I was like, well, of course I'm going to take it again.
Right.
Like I've got debt coming in. Like I'm not going to let this test. It's interesting the response that I had after failing the first time to the response that I have now is before it was like, oh, this is the worst thing ever, and now it's like, I'll get through it, and this test is not going to keep me from where I need to be. I've worked way too hard. Like they're not going to keep me out with that. And I swear, as soon as I get that pass, Beyonce is going to be I'm going to be having the time of my life. So that's what I look forward to. I know it will happen. I just don't know when. But
yeah, absolutely. Now here's a question I ask everybody. I like this one a lot. So one day, unfortunately, we're all going to pass away.
Yes.
And when we do, there'll be a funeral and there'll be someone who gives your eulogy.
Mm-hmm.
So when that day comes, what's the one thing you want to make sure that person says, like you hope that person says about you in your eulogy?
Well, let's see. I would hope that people would say that I was I really want to think of how to say this in a good way. I really hope that people, and I know this is super just easy and, but I hope that people will say that I was kind. I think that being kind and just treating other people with respect, it goes a long ways. And that's one thing that I instill in my children all the time. And I don't want to get into the whole story, but after I failed the bar the third time, was it the third? I don't remember. There's so many of them. After I failed one of these times, I took my kids on a cross-country road trip. One of the things that I told my kids when I decided to, go on this venture of being a single mom and kicking their dad out is that, one of these days mom's going to be a lawyer and, I'm going to have money and we're going to be able to travel and do all these things. Well, I failed. And so I decided, I'm not going to wait for that one day. I'm not going to wait till when I have a ton of money. I'm just going to do it. And I didn't have a lot of money, but I had some cash and I was like, guys, we're going on a road trip. And we went across the country and back. And I opened my kids' eyes to a lot of different communities, I exposed them to things that they were not aware of, nor was I, because I'd never been to like the South, right? And there's areas in the South where it's like there's a lot of racism. There's a lot of it's a different world out there. And so I try to instill in my children to be kind human beings to everybody, right? So I do hope that if nothing else, if I take the bar 12,000 times or I die before I pass, that I hope that people get up there and they just say, you know, she was just a kind, good person. That's what I really want, you know?
Yeah. You know, and it doesn't take a lot.
It doesn't.
You can never understand how valuable a kind word to someone who's struggling could be.
Absolutely.
You know? I know there have been times where I've walked down, you know, I call it Cube City in our firm where
I've never heard anybody say that, but now you say it.
Yeah, you walk into this area and there's just cubicles everywhere, and it used to be, it's not so much like this anymore, but everyone on that floor, all the law clerks were law students, and they all looked so dead. So, you know what I mean? Because they go into school all night and then they come in and work all day, pulling all-nighters, and everyone's, and also, you know, attorneys are A-type personalities. If they're in trial, they're not super nice. I'm sure you got yelled at a few times.
Oh,
you know, we all did. I still do. You know, we all do. But every once in a while, I make a point, if I see someone who looks like they're struggling, to go up and be like, hey, just let you know, like, you're killing it. You're doing a good job. You know, even though, and just something that small can change
somebody's entire day. You have no idea. There are people that have done that for me that I can't wait to be able to, when I write my book, to kind of put those things, because I think that some people don't even realize like little impacts that they have made on my life just from little things that they've done. Sure. You know, my roommate from the other room, she heard the question that you asked about what they will say at my funeral, and she said, they will say that you are a badass bitch.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I hope you said that, because you are. I gotta tell you, to be willing. You look. The thing is what impresses me about you is you could have easily made so many excuses to quit. Yeah. And every single one of them is legitimate. Mm-hmm. If you were to have quit at any point, if you would have quit law school on that second week when you kicked your husband out and filed for divorce, nobody would have said a bad word about you doing it. Everyone would have got it. The difference, though, between you being successful and everybody else is that you just didn't. Yeah. You just didn't quit. And that is success. It's taking the hits and just keep going. Yeah. When everyone else quits, you don't. Yeah. This life is a war of attrition. Mm-hmm. You know, and the people who win are the people who don't fall. Yeah. Or if they fall, they get up and keep going. Yeah. There will be a lot of people in your life that will give up on you, and you cannot give up on yourself. 100%. You can't. You're a really impressive person. You really are a motivation there. I hope there's someone out there who's struggling. Yeah. Right. Well, that came out wrong. No, I know. I hope that there's someone out there. Please don't struggle. But I hope that if there is someone who's listening who's struggling, they look at Ella's life and go, I can make it. Yeah. You know, I hope that there are people out there who look at my life and say, I can make it. Neither one of us, you and I both, we have very different circumstances. We have very different life experiences. But by the numbers, neither one of us should have been where we're at. Right. And we are. And it's because we didn't let the naysayers, the numbers, especially, you know, but I don't want this to be about me. I want it to be about you. You know, you are the exact type of person that a politician wants to look at and say, look, we need to help this person. Yeah. Or look, the man is keeping her down. Yeah. But you know what? You are, if you saw a glass ceiling, you busted right through it. Yeah. You know, and that's really impressive. And these things that you're saying about, you know, being kind, you know, I heard a saying recently that really hit home, and it said something along the lines of, societies do best when old men plant trees, the shades of which they're never going to sit in. And so, you know, kindness is like that.
Yeah.
You know, you don't know if there's somebody who's sitting there who's struggling, who's having that worst day in their life, who you being kind will be the shade that somebody else needs to sit in.
Right. Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah. No, absolutely.
So anyhow, with all of that, thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
Thanks for your story. And so here's what I want. I want you to let me know. Obviously we're friends, so I'm going to hear about it. We're going to have you back on when you pass the bar.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about what it feels like and what your plans are next.
Okay.
So we'll have you back on, and we'll talk a little bit more about your story and what you had to go through to get through it.
Absolutely. Okay. We'll play some Beyonce too.
Yeah, I'll get some intro music. We'll get some intro music finally. By then, maybe I won't be so ghetto on this podcast.
Oh.
Anyway, well, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. And
thank you for having me. This was amazing.
No problem. And we'll talk to everybody again soon.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.